he was describing how at Elon they have free tuition for staff and faculty's children, which is like
Oh, yeah, that's incredible.
all right. Actually, one thing in Manila, if you don't mind, we've tried to have the staff and faculty's children, which is like we've tried to have Zoom up as well, so Jim can see people on Zoom
Oh, okay, do you want me to
if
put
possible.
over to the side?
No, you're good. No, I'm just more like when. I guess the way to do it would be Jim to share his screen, to share the screen. So here are the slides. So if we share our screen.
Yeah.
Oh, come on, Zoom.
Share. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
That
And then we can still see the people on Zoom over here. Okay. All right, so yeah, we'll start maybe in 4 minutes or so. Maybe.
Yeah.
Folks.
Oh, good.
Lawrence is STEM grad,
Oh, really?
2015.
No way. She just joined our PhD program. Laura, can you hear us? Yeah, she wasn't engineering.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's awesome. Well, there was another one that's been over a few of the, public, like the hub's been over there for, actually, Wake After. Oh, yeah, yeah.
He's biology. Let's teach biology.
Oh, cool, okay.
Yeah. Where did she originally go into the school board? Ashley, yeah, she's always going to be a teacher. She was, but she made biology.
Okay, I wasn't sure what her, if she had a different subject area, I don't know if it was always in it.
She's always talking about being a teacher. There's one I'm surprised we haven't heard from, because her same year that Laura graduated, and she went to Flagler, I think. It's a really good campus.
There, where I think that,
Oh,
thing, obviously.
but she was there in that. Over. That's manually.
Oh, look, go Griffin, sorry. Oh, that's great. That's awesome to hear. It's wild how much we have per year. This was such a small pool and, but even more that.
Experiences, like Joe for now, Lily Parker, she finished her before she's in grad school now. And then Beaver, Caleb, doing a 5-year ministry program. Those are all 3 different paths and.
Do you know how I can put this in presentation mode and still see the
Yeah, it was.
participants? I can't, can I?
I wish we could bring it.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Pushing up buttons, ask for an help.
You said about 12:05 we'll start? Or?
That's what
Okay.
he said.
Yeah. Is he coming back?
Well, he went to get food, so I'm assuming that he'll be back in the middle of the presentation.
Oh,
He
okay.
has to go all the way to Publix.
Yeah.
See, he has to bike all the way to Publix. It'll be the second.
Yeah.
Where's- Oh, is he going to the one over in the,
It is, yeah.
Right,
by the,
Yeah.
okay.
down on the end of the strip, I would imagine is where you're going.
Yeah, the halfway there, partway between where we
Probably
are. and
monitor the chat.
Well, it's about that time.
Hey, do you want me to log in on my phone so I can monitor it from here? Or are you just gonna sit over there?
I'm just gonna sit over here.
Somebody was gonna monitor the chat. Cause I hid the controls on there so we wouldn't see them, so,
Uh,
but we'll teamwork it,
There you go.
figure it out.
Well,
do you wanna go ahead and get started?
sure, yeah, no, And I know we're a small group, but I still move around. I can't not, like, it bothers me to sit still and I won't feel comfortable doing it. But my name is Jimm, and I'm the principal of the Element STEM Academy. And Josh had asked me to come and talk a little bit about kind of what we do, where we're going, and then take some questions from people about that. So, just gonna introduce first, who I am, what I do, what the school is for people, because we take for granted sometimes that not everybody's from Knoxville, not everybody knows about the school, and quite frankly, even if you're from Knoxville, we've only been around for 12 years, so it's a little bit of a new thing when you're looking at the overall picture. I want to make sure this is working. Let's see. Josh is,
You click on the slides. Not try. No,
it's making noises,
yeah,
but that's all we got.
okay,
Is it because of what's on the screen there, the closed captioning?
maybe. Can you
Close
click
that
the-
out?
The X, close it.
All right, now let's try. I did not.
Oh, technology is great when it works.
Let's see. Oh, there we go. Let's see, yeah, now we're controlling. Okay, so a little bit about kind of the school first and who we are. So you can see on the picture there that we are right on World's Fair Park, and you can even see part of UT from that picture, which we love this shot. It was taken by one of our students a couple of years ago with one of our drones to kind of give an outlook of it, but he also has a great eye for photography, so that was kind of neat to see. But we are a standalone STEM magnet high school here in Knoxville. Our students enter through a blind lottery, and so that's very different compared to many of our highest achieving schools that are similar as magnets in the state of Tennessee. Many of them are tested, and we are a blind lottery. We get that breakdown of our population based on the geographical blind lottery, essentially. So if Bearden High School is 10% of Knox County school students, 10% of our incoming students come from the Bearden High zone. So there's a separate list for each one of those, of a wait list of students to be able to get in. And so we take in around 165 freshmen each year. And last year, for those 165 spots, we had about 520 or so applicants. And so we have a lot of students wanting the spots of those. And I think part of that's due to some of the success that we have listed up here with being the only regional school, high school in the state of Tennessee, where we serve not only Knox County, but 9 surrounding counties that each get 2 spots per class. And it cannot make up more than 10% of our population. We are US News and World Report, the number 8 ranked high school in the state of Tennessee, which is tremendous, and the number 1 in East Tennessee and in the Knoxville metro area, which is something we're really proud of. We try to look at those national standards and kind of look at some longer term test scores, things like that they look at, and not necessarily so much the state ones. And I say that only because the state ones seem to change every couple of years. They work on the College Board, ACT, things like that. And again, a little bit about me. This is my 19th or maybe 20th year, lose track in education. So I've been doing this for a little bit now. Was a math teacher for, gosh, 10 or 11 years down in Florida. A couple of years up here in Knox County before I got into administration. And I'm supported by a wonderful wife and a 3, or sometimes I say 2 really great kids. I'm not gonna say which ones, but it only takes about 20 seconds to figure it out when they're all together. But we love them. We love them equally. They're wonderful. One of the things I always put in presentation, I'm very easily distracted. So get me off on something and we'll go off and it will go off on something wonderful, but it will happen. And I struggle to have a filter sometimes, just say what I'm thinking and what's on my mind. And sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not. So I like to, when we're looking at and giving presentations, talk a little bit of what my faults are to make everybody else feel comfortable. We all have them constantly. And I always kind of apologize up front when I accidentally swear, because it's going to happen. That's just who I am and what I do. And I try hard, I promise. But to talk a little bit about the school and what makes us different and what we do, and kind of a really brief history, Josh would ask me to talk about what we are and where we're going. And so the cornerstone, the foundation of our school is Stanford's D-School process. So we go through the design thinking process in everything that we do. We do it in the instruction with our staff, our PD with our staff. We do it in the training of our students. in every facet, through music classes, to STEM classes, to math, science, all of these, we do through that Stanford D-School process lens. In fact, every student at our school takes STEM 1 their first year, which we completely embed the D-School process into that. We chose Stanford because of that first step of empathy. That is a huge thing for us as a school, to take that end user in mind before we do anything. So those not familiar with it, that the essential element here, this is kind of one of those vision, mission statement things we put out there, that is the essential element of a high quality education, is that design thinking way for us. So that is that empathize, define, ideate, prototype, test. We try to make sure on everything we do, we go through that process. We try to put it in practice with our teachers, with any decisions we're making about programming. If it's about, do we add this department? Do we add this type of class to it? We go through the process of this. And you'll see here in a minute what made us go through a pretty drastic change, all went through this process. Students practice then out of these 6 STEM habits. We've got professionalism, inquiry, design, innovation, critical thinking, collaboration. Our kids know that those are the things that in everything we do, we're going to make sure we're hitting on those points. By the time they graduate, this is what we want our students to do, to be able to really do and understand. It doesn't matter what STEM field they're going into, or if it is a non-traditional STEM field, we want them to take this lens into whatever field that is. And that's a really important key piece for us. This is taught through all of our classes, but it's really interesting to see how the English teachers, the art teachers, social sciences, how they embed these things into their work to kind of show that connection of STEM in what they teach. So to kind of get started on, one of the things that Josh had asked me to talk about was kind of where we're going as a school, because a couple of years ago, we made a pretty drastic decision, pretty drastic change, which is really hard to do sometimes when you're being successful. And we had been pretty successful at school. We had kind of moved our way from a beginning school up to, the top performing school in the Knoxville area. And so we were really, really proud of that, but we don't get comfortable, and you can't get comfortable. And so we started to, as we always do, reflect on what we're doing, look at that self-reflection and say, how are we doing? Is it what we're supposed to be doing? And is it what our students need and our community needs? And so students, teachers, businesses, community partners, all had a similar message in these meetings we started to have, because we said, hey, how do we reflect on it? Let's have meetings. Let's bring people together and say, what do you think? And that was a really interesting, very time consuming, but interesting practice. We took, first was a group of students and then we had a virtual meeting with parents, and just really for a couple hours sat down to ask questions, dig into what we were doing. What does this look like? Are you happy with the education you got? Are you happy with the one you're getting? So alumni included as well. And then we took the teachers, I guess this would have been 3 years ago, in the second year of it, we gave every teacher a half of a day of coverage in their classes. We took them off campus and we held these ideation meetings and said, okay, we've done well. Let's talk about that and reflect on that, but what do we need to be doing 10 years from now? What does that look like? What does STEM education look like on the teacher end in 10 years? And so we had these ideation meetings, and we would bring maybe 6 people, 7 people, was it 10?
Yeah, there were you and I, 6 others.
Yeah, in each of these meetings. And so, and this is Tim Powell, by the way, he's our business community liaison and the career academy coach now. That transition we'll talk about here. And we would take them in, and it was groups like this. A lot of times this reminds me of a couple of them. Some of them were at like a coffee house. We had one in an office downtown that it was people that donated space. And we'd sit around and say, okay, nothing's out of the question. Like a pie in the sky idea. What would you love to have? What could we do? And from that, we got some really interesting discussions going, a ton of information. But we did that not only with them, but we also then brought in community partners. So county mayor, people from the chamber, people from the district, different businesses, and we all sat down at different times and we asked those same questions, about 6 questions that we went through. And through that, the things we found were amongst all groups that our messaging wasn't as targeted as we originally intended. We needed to get back to the professionalism piece that we had kind of pulled back a little bit from. We only saw that on, really, I think we talked about the COVID end of things where we were getting a grace in everything we did, which was appropriate at the time. But as we started to try to push the envelope to challenge our students, we needed to say, okay, let's get back to what this looked like, get back to what the community needs. The next thing they said was that experiences were important, ownership of their education, the students owning what they were learning was important. And the self-reflection piece was also important there. So we heard experiences and opportunities, ownership, community, and focus. Those were 4 things. So those were the 4 things that we really focused on as a school as we went through things. So from this, we said, okay, what does the next 10 years look like? And now, is there a way to move so I can see some of the stuff on the slides? I don't want to leave out anything to say, because sometimes I have to remind myself what's on them.
Is there?
If not, it's okay.
It's cool. 1 second, please. Are your slides consistently prettier on the left?
Yep. They're clear on the left. Yeah, it's just the logo there. Yeah. Perfect.
So if that will work better, does that work better?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I can go back on it. Where's? Oh.
This Apple computer is gonna be the death of me. Hold on a second, sorry.
Oh, that's true.
But now I can see if anybody talks.
Okay, there we go.
And
Are we, oh.
is that better?
Here, the clicker's not working there.
All right, hold on. How about now?
Now it is, all right. So we get back to where we were. No, this is perfect. So as we were talking about this, we started to come up with this idea and said, okay, we needed to focus on particular things. We needed to make sure our kids were refocused on the STEM pathways and really got back to what we were, because what we were finding in our students that were applying were they weren't necessarily there for a STEM education. They might have been there to escape something. They might have been there to, again, escaping something, meaning get away from something at their day school. Maybe it was a group of friends, whatever it was. But we were finding those students still to be successful, but we had to look back and say, is that what we were intended for? Is that what we were created for as a school? Was that our original plan? And the answer was no. We had kind of steered away from that a little bit. And so we had to say, okay, where do we need to go to do that? And so a group of people went out to Stanford to where the design thinking school, the D school, where they do all this out of Stanford for trip, started to talk about some different ideas. And through some of that ideation, the idea came about that. So in the future, every kid is going to need to have computer science foundation, a computer science background, some sort, whether it's coding, cyber, something in computer science, because of how much that means in our world. And so from that idea, the idea of every student taking computer science foundations as a freshman, as a required course when they come in, came about. And from that, our computer science department really grew. It went from our CT department being 3 teachers, 1 in design, like graphic design, digital design, 1 in networking, and 1 in web design, to some math teachers starting to pick up some coding courses. Another math teacher has now been into engineering courses, to growing that into just a tremendous success. But that stemmed out of that conversation. And through that, we started to develop some other things like, what else is important? What other pathways do students need to have at our school? And so we had this idea of pathways, student pathways that they would take through high school that they would choose after their freshman year. And at the same time, Knox County was moving toward a model through this thing, and you may have seen it in the news about the 865 Academies, which was a program run through for Next Generation Learning, where they kind of help steer kids in different directions, give them the resources to be successful based on their particular interest or community needs. It was very similar to what we were doing. And when this was all happening, we had originally said, no, give another school our spot. We're doing our own thing, it's fine. But then, to be honest, because we all work in public ed, I was watching a board meeting at like 4 a.m, washing dishes, because that's, what you do when you wake up in the middle of the night and don't have anything else to do. Yeah, I'm listening. I hear Dr. Wilson, one of our members of Central Office, talking about the program they were moving forward with that for next generation learning. And he was talking about a position that he and I had talked about before that was very similar to what we were doing with Tim's position. And I'm going to have him introduce and like talk about that in just a second. And I thought, well, kind of probably should do that since they're paying for it. And I'm paying for it on that out of my own budget. What if I can get them to pay for it and have the resources? So of course, I texted Keith when it was an appropriate hour to talk to other people, not 4 a.m, and said, hey, I want to chat sometime about some ideas. And from that, just to get over the details of it, we jumped into the first cohort. They asked us to, they added the positions. And I'll at that point ask Tim to maybe just talk a little bit about how your position came about and what that is.
My title was called Academy Coach, and I am responsible for executing the plan that the county has come up with fidelity, so that we're doing the things that are expected. And what's nice about that is we were doing a lot of these things anyway, and up there it said experiences and opportunities, and that's kind of my department. I go out and so if you are an English teacher and you're like, we're doing persuasive writing, do you have a guest speaker? Well, an attorney is a great guest speaker for persuasive writing because that's all they do is persuade. So we can bring in somebody that can show this is a real world application. But we have partners throughout the community. And so those experiences, we have kids who go, we send 5 kids the first Tuesday of every month to Children's Hospital, and they get a tour from top to bottom of about 90 different careers that are offered at Children's Hospital and how that functions. They have a UT student who is one of their lead volunteer coordinators, and so he does that for us because that having somebody who looks almost like me, just a little older, seems much more identifiable than me telling them here's some jobs at the hospital. So I go out and I make those connections, try to find opportunities for our students. All of our freshmen are exposed to multiple careers. We have guest speakers that come in. We have a career fair. And so that falls under me. And then in their junior year, they go out and they have a tour of a workplace that's in their interest. And then in their junior and senior year, they're job shadows and internship kind of things. But the idea is the more we can get the community in, and as a guest lecturer, every teacher has to have a guest lecturer once a semester. It cements some of those, oh, this is why we're doing this. Oh, this is how I might use that in the future. But when people come and see what we're doing, they want to come again, and just opening up opportunities for students. Funding will follow that because education always can use more money. And so
Yeah, and that a lot of what he's talking about there is things that we were doing ahead of where the district was going with this. We had all these things that we had that Tim was doing and that we had defined in this role. And then when we were able to sign with them and they asked us to do that, we said, yeah, because now we get a position and now we can add back another position. It's just more resources. It worked out really well. And it also helped us have an impact, a broader impact, because Tim was able to share a lot of ideas with the other academy coaches of the other schools. They work really well as a unit together to come up with and kind of write the plan as we go, which is, how it usually works in education. And so as we were developing those pathways, we said, we've got these pathways need to be a deep dive for kids. They need to give them a real idea of what the job could be, but also then a deep dive into career exploration and the electives that we have in school. So kid isn't blindly just taking a bunch of electives because this might be cool or this might be cool. Well, if you got this interest, try these ones. Doesn't mean you have to stick with that only because we want kids to see other things. But if you're into this, try this class. And so we kind of developed some paths that worked with that. And for us, it identified and answered some of the questions that the community had said, so we strayed away from our original plan. Let's fix it. We're getting that back to academically excellent, not the come as you are, escape from others. We had to find that middle ground of what that would be for us at school. And this was our way to do it. So we increased our expectations in academic rigor and professionalism. the professionalism and how we talk, how we dress, how we prepared for things, and how we went about doing our business. And from that, we have the pathways. Well, as it turns out, the state level CTE has these things called pathways. And so we were like, well, can't call them pathways anymore now that we're signing on to do all of this, because that's going to be very confusing. That choose your pathway and then choose your pathway within your pathway. The other schools were calling themselves academies. Well, it's in our name already. We're the Element STEM Academy. Having the academies within an academy is really stupid. It just sounds really dumb, and I couldn't handle it. And so we were looking at things. We said, okay, how about the schools of the Element STEM Academy, which we loved and we worked with. And then I realized like a couple months ago, well, you are a school also. So, but we're an academy with schools in it, so we are no longer just one school. That's what we're going to say. And so from that, we found the schools of the Element STEM Academy. We started to define what those are. So they're a narrowed area of focus for our students. They're pathways geared toward what we do in the classroom, as well as the areas of growth in our community, locally, regionally, nationally. Students are going to be competing globally, so we feel like we have to set them up for the success within that. We have to look at what are the jobs they're going to be getting in 10 years, not what does the community need right now. So those conversations were all forward focused. They were focused on recruiting students that are attracted to our school for the related fields we did, instead of a kid coming and being miserable because they just wanted to escape something and not realizing they're going to have to take all of these STEM courses. We wanted to attract the students who are there for the reason of getting a STEM education. And it removed the focus on the content while still embracing the individual needs and interests of our students. So for us, these are these 4 schools, and I'll explain some of the corporate things and the UT things in a second here. But for us, the 4 schools were the computational science and cybersecurity, physics, mechanics, and engineering, advanced inquiry, research, and design, the School of Design Thinking. So each one of these 4 schools of the LNN are individual, and within them have individual paths for kids to choose and kind of run with throughout their 4 years in high school. With each one of these, the idea for us was that we would have some sort of business or community sponsor that helped guide not only curriculum, but also the resources we may need, or help us find the resources we need to better prepare these students for what is ahead. They also are that person to sit down and say, what's the community need? What do we need to keep that conversation continually going, and not just relying on the conversation we had when we started? Because it changes every, in the computer science and specifically, every 6 months, they're telling us a different thing that needs to change within that. And so we began to work with CGI for the computational science and cybersecurity, advanced inquiry and research. We're partnering with Patel, who probably not a better name in research when it comes to that than Patel. And so that's a great partnership for us as a school. We have a local company in Pat Doan Promotions that we're working with in design thinking, as well as the University of Tennessee. And you'll see the overarching University of Tennessee thing there, because we really are partnering them on many levels, and there's more things to come with that as we kind of take the can down the road a bit. But specifically in the physics, mechanics, and engineering, the physics and astronomy department and the Tickle College of Engineering have become official partners of our school. Within that, the physics and astronomy department for the last, I guess it'd be 2 or 3 years now, their professors come over and speak, I think once a semester, each one of them within the departments, to our students in a physics or astronomy course. So they're teaching a lecture of some sort. We keep a very close communication with that department, with Dr. Mezzacappa, has been a huge supporter of the school, and has probably been our biggest advocate for making these things happen. And then in engineering has signed on to partner with them because of the way our schools line together to work with our engineering department in the same fashion. This is only going to expand more and more as we go throughout. But the Tickle College of Engineering, that started through just a conversation with Suresh Babu, who was, I think he's in aerospace and biomedical, mechanical. And he had some doctoral students that he sent over to the school to learn how to run some equipment, write some lesson plans for some equipment that he and I saw when somebody got us together in a meeting, and I thought that looked cool. When I saw Suresh get really excited about it, like, he's very smart, very successful. I have no idea what that machine is, but when he got excited, I thought, yep, if it's free, we need to have that. Didn't know what we were going to do with it, but I figured Suresh would find a way to, and absolutely did. And I believe those doctoral students won an award last week for the research they did with it and the lesson writing that they are then sharing with our engineering teachers. So super cool things in that relationship that is guiding what we're doing as a school. And so you'll see our kids around here, and you'll see professors going over there, and it's a pretty neat thing to see there. So students at the end of ninth grade year, after being exposed to all this, decide which one of these schools to enter. They're heavily exposed to careers in those fields, and it gives them that guided path of courses that are going to help them build the skills they need toward that career path. We also do teacher externships within them. So these companies will have our teachers out for a day to be able to learn what's going on in the job, to really help push some of that. So not just the people that are the leads over specific schools, but just every teacher within it seeing what's happening in the real world. So an English teacher going to a CGI and learning what they're doing on the computer science end and see, how do I relate that to what I do? And I'll jump over this one a little bit, but the other piece of that, when we talked about the ownership in those meetings, was a student portfolio, which are some skill sets that we make sure all of our students are going to have by the time they graduate. And this is kicked off this year as well. So we know we needed comprehensive learning, we needed experiential learning, we needed an ownership of learning piece, self-reflection, community service, and then the big research and presentation piece. We're big believers in getting kids up in front of people and talking. Getting people comfortable with presenting to somebody else, and then collaborating to make that happen as well. So those kind of dig deeper into what that piece is. But as I'll get to this part here. This is a part that I think is going to be really interesting to watch over the next 4 years, and that is that research and presentation piece. So all of our students work each year for just a little bit of public speaking, giving presentations, and it grows each year. Our plan is that this year's group of freshmen, by the time they're seniors, will have a kind of culminating project that they're going to be presenting at our yearly symposium. Last week, Tim and I were were invited to come over to the senior design showcase for engineering, where we were getting to see the senior project. And it's really neat to see, because they're partnering with an outside company, given a problem, and then coming up with a plan to solve it, working throughout the whole year. On that kind of smaller level is what we're looking for our students to be doing their senior year of high school, which is really exciting. And you couple it and you find ways to incorporate that into all the classrooms and do different things with it. But that is the kind of thing we want our kids to be able to do. And then looking at some of the best works, publishing them in a hard copy that a student walks away with at the end of the year. Something that says, this is the research being done by our high school students at the end of their senior year. We know that's also somewhat self-serving in that is a great recruiting tool. When a parent is coming through looking at, my kid is really bright, wants to study STEM, they're saying, oh my gosh, this is what a senior is producing their senior year as far as research goes. That's a nice thing to be able to throw out there on the table. Oh, that might be the last of the slides there. So what we saw in all of this, as we're talking about it, is the importance of being able to, quite frankly, embrace the fact that we need business partners, that we need community partners, that we should let that drive some of the things that we do, because in the end, what we're supposed to be serving is our community. We're supposed to be making our community better. And if our community says this is what we need, then we need to look at a way to provide that. And I think that's a different look at education than we probably have been doing for a long time. I think it's more of, this is what we've said we need, and so that's what we're going to provide. It's no, what does the community need, or what might it need in 10 years? How do we take the years of research that we have of what students should have at the baseline, and then how do we add to that to make sure that is the type of kid that is coming out at the end? So, Josh, I don't know if that accomplished, we're looking at a little history and kind of where we're going and what we do here as a school. So
That's great. Yeah.
I didn't want you to think we ignored your request. We hid them because we couldn't see the slides.
No,
yeah,
yeah, it's very important to me for the Zoom people to have.
yeah, for sure.
No, thank you so much, Mr. Allen.
Yeah, I didn't answer any questions anybody would have too. So.
How about this? A quick round of applause first. What if you can excuse me from bringing lunch in while you were presenting, we grabbed some food and then came back for Q&A in like 5 minutes. Once everyone here is grabbed.
Work for me.
All right, great. Thank you.
Yeah.
We hit the bar too, so it's kind of like getting
Oh, thank
away.
you. Yeah. Thank you guys so much.
Oh, they're, yeah.
We'll do that. No, you're great.
They're right.
You are
We hit all
perfect.
kinds of stuff
Sorry.
while we were messing.
Thank you guys for the help.
Actually, it wasn't we, it was actually just Ashley.
Well, thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone online. We're gonna grab some sandwiches and some food.
Great.
we don't have the ability to do that through Zoom just yet, unfortunately.
Out in the water.
So we'll come back for a question and answer in just about 5 minutes. End discussion. Thank you all for being here.
Oh, okay. Okay. Right. How is Ryan? Oh, yes. Yes.
Where's the- Okay, I thought it was a text.
Yeah.
He's done like.
Oh, awesome.
Well, you know, we can see him next. It's hard for everyone anyway. But he's not in computer science. And was eight. And he did one. The radiation is wrong, but on that.
I just said it was.
Oh, I just don't think you're gonna do the homework. Required to do when you so.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep, and you're bringing it over.
Question. So, that goes.
What happened?
Oh, that's awesome.
I was supposed to do.
Bruce, I'm trying to- Like 23, 25.
Oh, okay.
And so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He says,
This
is on.
Yeah. Yeah.
We put together.
That's right.
We play over and over.
Yeah.
And they just like talk about the last year.
That's awesome.
They had a lot of that studies, their seniors in their older classes.
They have to present.
Yeah.
So between Tuesday and 3 p.m. and 9, I'm like, realize all the.
We love asking like, what else?
Yeah.
All that makes sense. He's one of my.
Is that what you were showing?
Yeah.
In our slide.
That was a good part. Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah.
Who we need to every 3 or 4 months.
That's how we talk. Believe me, everything in here right now, we're all just like, everything. It's all in that. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Where did you go to school?
They goes to,
Oh, okay.
we were, yeah, no, we just met like 3 weeks ago.
Yes. I know I.
Oh, and
We did it for.
Yeah.
He didn't get chosen in
Okay.
the lottery, but it's okay. He's going to CMA.
Oh, nice.
So-
Okay. Is that?
Yeah, he got the second choice. So it's on the phone, it's strong, so it's very similar to Ellen, but it's a different pathway. Remember that, right? With this Indian refresh, I think I said 3 stock, I think 3 bigger this year, but.
That's great. Oh, okay. No, and that's a great thing. That kind of other type of program.
Grew up at.
Yeah.
Just the transition from university standpoint from.
Yeah, so that's a bit of a change. And well, there's funny this first summer was last year with Ryan. And it was awesome to hear the stories he has up. He is, I tell that was one of my favorites. Just he's just her son is. That your son, I was so happy to see you come in. To hear how he's doing.
When we came to the senior building, there would be other questions.
Oh, yeah.
You know, what are you doing? What's going on? What's that? And then what can we do? You know, here, what can we do differently in life? We were hearing yes, that. And at this point, this is the year. Everybody's not. I would be putting out you, me, was a private unit. Squares. And blue eyes.
Oh,
And
yeah.
dad's left handed brown eyes, what are my combinations? And they had to write a program. for it, right?
So Josh, I got big news yesterday.
What's up?
I got invited to
And now we're.
the #1 accounting conference in the country
Yeah.
to speak on diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Congratulations. Congrats. Wow. What's the conference?
It's the American Accounting Association, their annual event. So it's in Denver, and I'm going to speak alongside one of the big 4 accounting firms.
Amazing. I'm not surprised.
That's exciting.
That's worth celebrating.
My department doesn't let non-tenure track faculty travel. We don't have a travel budget,
Yeah, yeah.
but they're gonna make an exception and run me to go to this one, so I'm pretty excited.
That's thrilling. What is it? You said?
It's August 7th. So maybe I'll find a beach before then. We'll see how it goes.
Sounds great.
Well, we walked away just like walking on the clouds and the sea. I was happy to know that you had a role. Yeah.
So we don't get about 100%.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for the slightly different schedule as we paused for lunch. I just wanted to briefly take a minute to thank Jim and Tim for coming today. L&N STEM is a public magnet school, as you heard, and it does, in my mind, 2 things at once. It's excellent and it meets students' needs. And it's kind of a gem, I think, for that reason, and also because you all continue to push and do more. And so this is a special chance for us to hear from what is possible in public education with the right support from the district and the right leadership and building a culture with students. So just want to thank you.
Yeah, no, I absolutely appreciate being here, and it's nice to know that we were, and just talking to people that when you're, sometimes you underestimate like some of the impact you have, and then you hear from like a former student and see the things they accomplish. It is the best feeling you could possibly have. But the thing we always ask then is, what could we have done better? No matter like what, it's always, what have we done better? I think it speaks to that, like, we're always just trying to push it. What's next? That's not good enough. Innovators can't be content. So what's next? What do we need to do next that's gonna make us better?
It's a good message for us at the UT side too. Working to like invigorate and redo our programs as well. Oh, I'd love to open it to questions and
Sure, yeah.
maybe our kind of habit over the last year has been to start with folks on Zoom. So
Yeah.
to recognize them here as well. So anyone on Zoom have any comments or questions? How LNN works? All right, so if y'all on Zoom have thoughts or questions, feel free to type them in the chat or to unmute and ask. I'll give anyone in person a chance to ask a question. I've got one I've been waiting a few years to ask you, Jim.
That's scary.
Wow.
And years I've been waiting on this question. Well, yeah, that's you. Thanks.
Okay, I guess you mentioned the 4 schools, was it? Yeah. How exactly are the students making the decision of what school to
Yeah.
focus on or
So yeah,
assign?
that's a great question, and we didn't, we don't dive too much into it, but there's in the presentation, but there's a lot of time that goes into it. So throughout their entire freshman year, they're exposed through their STEM 1 course, their computer science foundations, as well as their advisory, and even in their English class and social sciences, to different opportunities and careers that are available within different fields. So we are purposefully going through and exposing them to as many things as we can. We also use the U-Science program that does both an aptitude and an interest test that is a pretty in-depth and takes quite a bit of time. I'm always skeptical of, taking answering some questions and kind of seeing what it looks like and following it. But when you utilize something like that as a single point of data to help students make that decision, because it's not going to take in everything. And that one is a very comprehensive, and it was spot on when I took it, because education was way down on the list and I knew that I wasn't that good at it. And so when I took it as an adult here, mine were all like engineering, all these things. It's like, well, I'm a principal, I don't know what that means, but for our kids, it was neat to see how those two things align, their interest of what they perceive it to be, and then what that aptitude might have been as well. So they utilize that as well in the guidance of it. But it ultimately comes down at our school to the student's decision on what that looks like. And then the choose their courses from there. So there is a lot of front end research, and that's why we do the entire 9th grade year of learning it, that they don't choose it until the end. And then guess what? High school kids change their minds. High school kids, they change and they find themselves, they do different things. Because we're at a STEM school where all of these paths are STEM related, changing isn't a crazy hard thing to get to do. That might mean that you might not finish a series of classes that you might want to be able to do. So if you go from the physics, mechanics, and engineering to design thinking, and it's because you decided, you know what, I really liked the graphic design course I took, or I want to be an architect, and you didn't make it through all of those courses in it, but you still got a baseline that you're prepared when you go on to the collegiate level. So you might not have taken up through the 4th level of something, but you got you still got your a good foundation.
Mhm.
That's a great question though, because that's a hard thing to decide and balance.
Yeah, I grew up in Panama.
Okay.
And our high school system, you have to decide like if you want to study arts and humanities or science, like at 9th grade.
Yeah,
And then from there, you just stuck in that path.
yeah.
So if you graduate and then you decide like, oh, I did science and then I really wanted to do business, and
Yeah,
it feels like you're backtracking. So
yeah. No, that's good. Because how many of us, I mean, I definitely didn't do what my undergrad was in, that so many of us are in that boat. And so we aren't naive to think that a kid couldn't have a mind change. And for a school like ours, where so many of these things are intermingled, they're STEM fields, it's really not as big as some of the more comprehensive high schools. As they go into these paths, I think that they'll start to that you'll start to see be a little harder for a kid to complete some sort of path or program of study within high school if they do change. And I think they're actually limiting even at those high schools how many times the kid can change, I think, to 1 while they're in school. So I think it's really important for me that ours did intermix, because I know these kids they don't know exactly what they're gonna want to do by the time they leave. And we all know that like so many of us are a couple years into undergrad, you're like, yeah, that's not it. That's not what I would do. I've taken all these. We're hoping to expose kids to that while in high school, to be able to give them that time in college to more focus on that piece. And I think that's part of the design of what we're doing. But we do try to front load a lot of this work.
thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Sorry, Francia has a question.
Yeah.
Sorry, do you have students from Hispanic and other backgrounds? And if so, what complements to those students' backgrounds or barriers to those students face at
Yeah, sure. And so because we are a blind lottery, it is really based on, applications. So some years we may have a set of students come in that as English as a second language. We do have a growing Hispanic population. For the parent, on the parent piece, a lot of times it is the parent engagement is already there because somebody had to fill an application for them. And so whether it was the student and with the parents helping fill out the application for the lottery, or it was the parent themselves, there's typically, we haven't run into a lot of situations without somebody there to be able to interpret if it's a language barrier. But because we do provide transportation and all of those things, different backgrounds, different, and when we talk about whether it's a student from a lower socioeconomic level or higher socioeconomic level, we try to break down any barriers that are in place there. So that transportation provided, the fact that our hours are accessible, we're not we're 9:30 to 4:30, which is different than a traditional high school, but that's so that we can have those transportation provided for kids so they can get bused to their zone school and then take a bus to us. And so we do have quite a few different students from varying backgrounds. If you look at it on how the state breaks down demographics, they include almost anybody from of Asian descent into the Caucasian breakdown. And so we do have quite a few Asian families, quite a few. So it'll look like, oh, they're 90 or 85% white or Caucasian, when our Arabic families, our Asian families will all also fit into that same realm. And so we do have quite a few people from different backgrounds there. And then our Hispanic population is growing quite a bit, which is really, really neat to see as a school. As the community grows, we grow. So because we are supposed to be a reflection of that.
Cool. Thanks,
And I
Jim.
would say that
Yeah.
our Knoxville's Spanish community is maybe not as so a lot of those parents don't have a high school education or beyond high school, and so they're not out there looking for these opportunities. And so that is an area of growth. We go into schools and promote ourselves, but we don't have a way to promote ourselves to parents who are first, so these are first generation students here.
Yeah.
If you don't know how the American school system works and you just know that, we live here, our kids go to this school, they're not looking at these alternatives and they're not aware. And so that is an area I can see that we need to grow. It's a hard to reach population for us, because our targeting in the way that we're allowed to market is, into public high school or public middle schools.
Yeah.
So we go into, we try to be very purposeful when we go in and do our presentations to take Hispanic students, African-American students, female students that are STEM majors. We want kids to say, that looks like me, that it isn't two white kids up there. And I don't see myself at that school. So we do make efforts to visibly, attract, or to show that we're there for everyone. Yes.
Yeah.
So out of curiosity, I don't know much about the school. So it is primarily a lottery system to get into the school?
It is a geographic lottery.
Oh, okay.
So by where you're zoned, so Bearden High School is the largest high school, so they get 13 spots.
13 is it?
Yeah,
The
and that's
freshman
it.
class, yeah.
And, Austin East is a very small school. They get 8 spots. And so depending on how big you are, you're between 8 and 13 spots. So we upped everybody.
Yeah, everybody went up.
We took
there.
one more kid from each school,
Essentially, yeah.
and so it's 9 and 14 now. Yeah.
Sorry, a follow-up question.
No, yeah.
So if it's a lottery system and you're trying to have an equally diverse group of students, wouldn't it be possible to do a lottery in terms of racial background or diversity of the population of Knoxville or
So,
something along
the
those lines?
way that it's written and the way that the school was kind of formed and created according to policy is based off of that zone. And in Knoxville, it changes, I guess the changes aren't too dramatic when it comes to that. So what we have to do is be purposeful because of those are our limits, and that's where we are. We don't run the lottery, it's the district. We are essentially, here's your students. We have to be purposeful in our recruiting efforts, and so to saturate the applicant pool, a lot of the students for each of those zones with students that we're trying to attract more of. Whether that's more students that are in that STEM focus or more students of color. we have to be purposeful in that recruiting, but you walk a fine line as well, because you are charged with representing it as a geographic lottery. And that is the only thing that we are decided upon. It is just geographic. They've got a pool. They give us a random list of people.
And we do run within 1% or 2 percentage points of Knoxville's demographic. Knoxville's demographic is, we're not a very diverse population in Knox County. I think it's
As a whole, yeah.
somewhere around 82% white. And we run about 80% Caucasian, and some years our Asian population is a little lower, sometimes our African American is a little higher and a little lower, but it always seems to be within a point or two. And so, like you said, our outreach into other areas, and we don't just go to middle schools, actually, we go to community fairs in East Knoxville. There's a church that has one every year. We didn't have it the last couple of years because of COVID. But if we know a place where we can reach a target population, we will go, because all we can do is just encourage applications.
Yeah, related, Francis,
Thank
Harper, yeah, sorry. Linda.
No, you're good.
Francis mentioned Centro Hispano could be a great resource for communicating.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, please.
Yeah, I have worked there and I'm coming back next semester. And they have a department that is college access,
Yeah,
and they do a lot of fairs and stuff like that with the kids. They're, yeah, so.
Can I leave you my card?
Yes,
Maybe we can talk
yes,
about it. Actually, there was a UT student who was working for Centro a couple of years ago, but it happened to be COVID year. And so everything shut down and we really couldn't do the event that he wanted to do. And I honestly, he moved on, he works for, I think, Planned Parenthood now, and I completely forgot, and, but
That'd be
no,
great.
Yeah, also they have an after school program, so the connection with the family that is really close and.
That's
you
great.
have interpreters and everything, yeah.
Thanks all.
yeah, that's great.
So, and Lona, the question, Jim, I wanted to ask you about it.
Yeah.
Was, well, it's sort of this, the thing I love about LNN is it's a public school. And so much hinges on the lottery because it's a very in-demand school. So my question was about how the lottery worked. You gave some color into that. Just for the sake of time, I'll just make a quick follow-up comment, which is putting my researcher hat on. So that was my question as like a parent and like a community member here all the time, parents and kids who want to go to LNN. How does it work? It sounds like it's a pretty fair process.
Very, yeah.
For putting my researcher hat on, whenever I hear lottery, that's really good from a research perspective because you have some process you can exploit in terms of these kids randomly got selected to be admitted, these kids didn't. And so you could look at different outcomes. 3 4 years, college related outcomes, other outcomes that we care about in terms of STEM interests. So I just see this golden research opportunity because of the lottery. That was the thing I've been waiting 5 years to talk about.
Well, and I'll tell you, you're 100% right. And my background is my undergrad is in analytics and data analysis. And so for me, if those are the things I think of too, Josh, as I'm looking at something where you're like, man, imagine what kind of information. And so we're at that point now where we've had, 8 graduating classes that have come through and fully 7. 9th, okay, so our 9th graduating class. You now have I'd say you have some pretty substantial data, some matriculation and then college college success to be able to pull from. And I think you probably have a pretty good number to be able to look at, to be able to measure that with, if we had the data of what these kids that were not, it would really be interesting to see what kind of, and then for us as a school, as an institution, it's what has each class or let's say groups as we go through a major change like we have right now, where this freshman class is going to be doing something different that we kicked off this year with these schools. How has that impacted them for beyond high school? Because it's easy to compare what the high school graduation rates and the acceptance into the schools, things like that. But ultimately, that's not what we're preparing for. We are going under the assumption when we bring these kids in that we know we're going to have you ready for college. What about beyond that? What about life beyond that? And so to be able to measure that should be really interesting over time. As every landmark thing we do, what impact did that have? Now, if we had the resources to be able to have somebody that studied those things as a high school, that would be great. So if UT, has anybody wants to do that as a project, please, we'll help, with whatever you want to do.
Killer dissertation idea. there.
Yeah, anything I can help you, sign off on to be able to make it happen, I will gladly, do so.
I'm looking at my colleagues with like mischievous grins.
Yeah. But only publicly, it's really good.
Jump on
So.
it.
Looking at the time, so it's one, so if anyone needs to head out, please, thank you for joining and please feel free to, I see a question. Oh, shoot, sorry, it was a direct message. Okay, Elizabeth, that was, sorry, this is the challenge of direct messages when we're zooming. So part of your question is disclosed to the group, Elizabeth. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah.
I think, well, I can speak as a parent.
Yeah, please.
Oh, yeah.
A student who won the lottery, and that's exactly how we looked at it in our family, like we won the lottery. And my understanding is that we're zoned for Farragut High School. And I guess anecdotally, we were told you have a better chance of getting in. There are fewer applicants from Farragut than from the period stuff. I don't know.
It used to be true, that used to be true.
Yeah, so we felt like statistically, we actually had a better shot than if we lived in Peoria. But I think one of the great things about, even though it is, if you want to say like just a geographical lottery, you're bringing in students from all over Knox County, as well as some of the surrounding counties that get 2 or 4,
Yeah.
something like that,
Yeah.
Jefferson County, County, and so on. So the diversity of the students is also expressed geographically. Because we're coming from, that particular area of Knoxville, there's students from all over in Knoxville.
Yeah.
And that gives you, again, exposure to people who live from all over the county. We're a large, square mileage geographically speaking.
Yeah, you're right in that we initially, when we talked about that, where we had certain, and the way I track it is via zip code, when we get the number of when we get the applicants. I'll get a list of all applicants, and it's just, I only ask for the number and really the zip code. Their names don't matter because more than likely most of them are going to be with us because they won't get drawn into it. But for me, it's that study of what is that percentage of the population, and if I'm looking at it by zip code, where are they coming from? And we have seen an increase of 150 to 200 applicants, an increase over the last couple of years. So we've always had waiting lists everywhere. But it's just, we thought, and this was just me personally, after the COVID stuff, where we weren't out recruiting in schools, we thought, we're gonna see a drop in applicants, and we've seen the exact opposite. We've seen a just skyrocket the number of applicants we've had. And we've seen it raise all across the board. But in some of the West Knoxville schools, we've seen a dramatic increase there, which we thought was really interesting. Where we had not seen, and we always had a wait list at each of the schools. We always had a lot of kids, but now our 37922, 37934, 37923, 332, all of these 19, they all went way up post 2020. Which we found to be really interesting. There wasn't any sort of targeted marketing of specific areas to increase that. It was, it could be in messaging of programs we're doing and people that had interest in those fields. But I don't know. I don't know what made it happen or what saw that increase there. The school success over a longer period of time does help.
I would say the academic rigor of the school, as well as the academic outcome.
Mhm.
A big draw.
Yeah.
Are a big draw just in general.
Right. Yeah. For us,
Initially, maybe you went into school where, like
Oh, is that
football or
Elizabeth's?
basketball.
Yeah.
right.
Foster you.
Right. Right. Yeah, I don't know.
Whereas now it's like, well, if you want targeted academics in a smaller
Yeah.
setting, wow, what a gold.
That's what we do. Yeah.
What's your demographics for students with disabilities?
So we have, and I think it surprises people sometimes how many students that we have with an IEP at the school. It varies year to year because again, being a lottery, but because of we are staffed at a certain number as a school, we can't offer a whole breadth of programming because it's offered at their base school, they can't allocate all of those resources to another school for us. So we don't have a CDCA program. We don't have any sort of satellite programming of any sort, but we do have a range of things for students with autism, or students with different learning disabilities. But it varies year to year on the percentage of students. So our caseload of students right now is in the, trying to think. I knew the number offhand, but it's less than 10% of our population, but not much less than 10% of our population.
And when you had 504s in there.
Yeah, we have a lot of students.
And I'm not an educator, so
Yeah.
how does that compare to typical other schools?
It's interesting because some of those things vary on, and this is maybe more on my end of the first basis philosophically, it depends on the person that diagnosed it, the site person that went through it, or what those things go in part of the meetings. But I've been at schools where it's upwards of 20% down to 5%. So I mean, it's, we run very similar to it. We have different types of needs that some of our students would have as far as that goes. But we also are very upfront and honest. It doesn't have to preclude a kid from getting into the lottery, but based on the services we offer, they may have to alter what their ID looks like because of that. But that doesn't, we never turn a kid away for it. We just might not be able to offer the programming that they do. And because we're a school of choice and because we're a magnet, we don't necessarily have the resources to be able to do that. And they're not going to add them to it financially as a district and as a state when the school that they're zoned for does have a specific program for that.
Great. Just a quick comment as we wrap up.
Yeah.
Elizabeth mentioned in some previous research on STEM schools, even those that had lotteries, were associated with students saying some really interesting things about fairness. So maybe another
Yeah.
follow-up study for some collaboration.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Ours is very, people always say like, you can do, you can get their kid in, right? I was like, no, they send me a spreadsheet and that's the kids. And then they upload it into our SIS system. I literally have no control. The only control that we have as a school, good to see you, are when we take a student as a junior or senior, we do get to interview and choose, but that's only if we have open spots. If we have any spots that have opened up over the years, and we base those solely off of that open spot and then on merit. We base it on where that student stands, and that's not because we want to boost the number or anything. We don't have any accountability if they join us as a junior. We don't get a boost in ACT or a boost in scores on things. They're taken out of that accountability cohort from the state. We would take them on if that kid, maybe moved in here from somewhere else, and this is the type of education that they were looking for, and we have the open spot, and they are going to be able to graduate from our school on time. If we've got the spot, those are the students, but it is based solely off of that. But that's just for juniors and seniors. And like this year, we took in 2 juniors, and they are kids who had been with us as freshmen, moved away and reapplied. And out of the list of students that applied for the 2 spots, they had they met all the qualifications. We took in no seniors this coming year because we have no seniors leaving to open up a spot for him.
And I will say 100% of our students who get in think it's a fair process.
Okay, sorry. I was like, thinking that in-
That's pretty good.
And when you don't get in, it's not quite as fair as you hope. Parents of smart kids want us to have an exam, so that their kids can get in. Parents who think that their kid was just geared toward this and they've been telling their kid about STEM and they've been on tours and they come to our meetings and their student doesn't get in. It doesn't, we have kids who get in and have never set foot in a school, and parents follow, well, and we see what to the school before we make our decision. So we always have a 2 tours scheduled after the letters go out. There is a preference given. So if you already have a student at STEM, so if you have a 10th grader and who's rising to the 11th grade and you have an 8th grader coming to 9th grade, if you apply, they will automatically get in. And that's more of a transportation family issue that Knox County looks at. But if you have a 10th grader, rising 10th grader who gets in as a sophomore, for the first year, we won't take your ninth grader automatically, because they have to already, one has to already be there for one to come in, the following year, but it wouldn't, other than twins, there's no automatic. If you had a 10th and a 9th grader that would apply, and not any other way necessarily.
And really, that's a, you know, they list it as like they get a, what is it, preference, or it's a, I don't remember.
Preference is what we call it.
Yeah, we call it, but it's really, and that's just out of, at public school, trying to help out parents of a kid, being able to make sure that they're not having to, but that's only, and that's not, gosh, that's only in the lottery part, that's not the juniors and seniors even, so I mean, it's very open, fair, blind lottery, based on geographics, which I take a lot of pride in that as well. Because, man, I wish you could test to get people, and it's like, I don't though, because I feel like we're doing a service for people that need it, and that want it, and I don't know, part of me really, there are days when you pull your hair out on some situation, you're like, how did this kid get in when this other kid just wanted to be here so bad? But that's part of also the beauty of the success we've had as a school too. You can look back on it and say, we did this for getting these outcomes for kids that we didn't screen them before they came in. These were kids who just applied and got in, and that's pretty neat.
Thank you. That, yeah, thank you. I'll let you have the last word. Thank you, Mr. Allen.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tim, what is your last name?
Powell.
Thank you, Mr. Powell. Thank you both, for taking the time, especially at this point in the school year.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is a great end to our seminar series. So, thank you all, for your participation today and throughout the year. Look forward to, building on the great speakers we have this year and next year.
Thank you, guys.
And so what do you do that you're not in the education program? What do you?
I'm a librarian.
Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, Marcia. Thanks, Elizabeth.
Okay, awesome.
And how about the rest of you?